We don't enter competitions. Competitions are a waste of time, risk, energy, fees, cost. But this one, we felt something different. People are comfortable with the concept of prayer. They are much less comfortable with the concept of answered prayer. So contrary to our normal wisdom, we decided to enter the competition. I prayed, and instantaneously, literally instantaneously, what popped into my head was 1 million bricks, which is going to be on the surface of the monument, representing 1 million answered prayers. I prayed in that moment of, Lord, what do I do with this? Inspiration struck, and I basically cut out a piece of card, twisted it into this Mobius strip, and I knew instantly I had something very special.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbert with Inspired. Great to be back for another fantastic week of encouragement, of hearing great stories. You know, I think we've all had enough of being relentlessly bombarded by negativity in the press. So many people are anxious and depressed and cynical, and that's the direct outworking. If you're stuck on the 24/7 news cycle, let's get off it and let's hear great stories that just stir our faith. And I got no doubt this week you're going to be super encouraged because we've got with us the wonderful Paul Bulkeley. Welcome, Paul.
Hi there, good to be with you. Nice to join you, Simon.
Yeah, really looking forward to this. So, Paul's best mate at university when he was studying to be an architect was another Paul, who is now my COO and one of the biggest encouragements in my life. And that Paul Tilbury, after his first year, he had a collapsed lung, which meant that he didn't carry on. And I'm sure, I totally gutted at the time, but isn't it interesting how in all things God works for good, and all these decades later, now he's a world changer with me and having a fantastic impact in Central Africa. I only say that because it's just interesting, isn't it, as God weaves the tapestry of our lives, and Paul ended up doing something completely different, although it would have been gutted at the time. But you, Paul, you've carried on, you've become the founder of Snug Architects. You're award-winning in that, on the news quite a bit of late because of what's been happening with this incredible project called the Eternal Wall of Answered Prayer. There's a lot more to you than that as well, in terms of being founder of BizMin and the author of the BizMin course, which is Business as Ministry, and that's across different nations. We'll talk about that, but let's go right back. You were born or raised a bit across the lake from me in Central Africa, a bit further to the south in the Congo. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. That takes me back a long way. I spent 12 years of my life in Zaire, as it was then, and now Democratic Republic of Congo, or as I sometimes like to call it, the not-so-democratic Republic of Congo. Sadly. And amazing time. My dad was a missionary doctor, and we grew up on the banks of the River Congo in the middle of the rainforest. And it was a really amazing place to grow up. And to sort of experience not only living in Central Africa, but being the children of missionaries and having the opportunity to really experience that kind of missional work very early in my life, as well as going off to boarding school and becoming, I think as a result of that, a probably fairly independently minded person. And it's not everyone's cup of tea, but boarding school didn't seem to do me too much harm, and gave me a kind of global perspective, which still to this day is a very important part of my identity.
Now, my kids also raised in Africa, and the challenge with missionary kids is that they've usually got the best stories about dodging bullets or playing with crocodiles. Any key memories from your early years?
Oh, I think my biggest adventures were heading off in a Land Rover for a week. My dad used to cover an area about the size of Wales, right, which sounds big, but it's not in African terms. And we just used to love heading off into the rainforest for a week, getting stuck in muddy roads and getting in and out of dugout canoes and making our way up rivers to villages in the middle of nowhere. And just a really exciting place to be young. As a kind of child, it was just a sense of freedom, a sense of the outdoors, and just really, really enjoyed being in a place that was very different to here. And loved all that. Yeah, so I still do, and I still feel very at home in Africa, and still feel very at home in other parts of the world, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But yeah, big part of my heart is international, and that's where a big part of my identity remains.
And I'm guessing faith was innate to you because of your parents. What was your journey to appropriating it for yourself?
So I came across a letter actually that I must have written when I was at boarding school at some point to my grandparents. And it became apparent to me reading that letter, I must have had quite a strong sense of God in my life and a sense of confidence in God, because I was clearly writing about it at age 10 quite confidently. But from a personal point of view, I always attribute my kind of moment of personal salvation to a Billy Graham event when I was 13. So I was at boarding school in London, and I was 12 or 13 because my parents hadn't yet come back from Africa, and I went along to this big Billy Graham event. Possibly Crystal Palace, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I went forwards, and as one of those many thousands of people who went forward at a Billy Graham event. And so that was kind of where I would say I made my personal commitment. But I think I moved around quite a lot as a kid, and we ended up in the Lake District for a bit and changed school, and my faith sort of drifted during that period. And it was only really when I was 17 and I properly kind of found Christian friends. And that was the point when I really started to properly reconnect with my faith, get serious about my faith, and start to experience more of the Holy Spirit in my life and begin to use the gifts of the Spirit more proactively and begin to serve God in that way. And so I think, 17, 18 was where I felt I really entered into the faith adventure. And really got involved. So that was a key part of my life.
Go on, flesh that out. What did that look like?
Yeah, what did that look like? Well, I think a really key moment for me, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about the relationship between our God-given gifts and the things we do in our lives, and that for me is a really important principle. And I remember I'd been asked to speak at a kind of church event. It was actually a friend's church. I think it may even have been a girlfriend's church, actually. And I was asked to speak at this event, and I've never been short of confidence. So I sort of said, yes, I'll do that. And then as the moment arrived and the moment approached, I got really nervous, as one sometimes does. And I just remember just before I got up to speak, overwhelmed with nervousness. And I just prayed a very simple prayer. I just said, Lord, Jesus, please give me the words to say. And I just felt myself being filled with the Spirit for the first time in my life in a way which I can remember to this day, and stood up, spoke eloquently, others tell me. And I experienced God stepping in, that sense of the Spirit anointing you for something that is in service to Him. And that's been it was a very important moment in terms of realizing what that's like, experiencing that, and that has then informed and been a big part of my life going forwards. But that was like a key moment, I think, as well, in terms of knowing that God had gifted me for a purpose and for something that I would do more of as the years were to roll on. And so that has been speaking about Jesus, having opportunities to speak about Jesus have been a huge part of my life, and something I, to this day, just love to do and love to. There's a freedom in it. I think when we're walking in our giftings and our God-given giftings, there's a freedom and a joy, and a lot of the burden and the struggle and the anxiety and stress and things that were literally physically experienced in that first moment lifted, and that kind of freedom continues. And I have to keep reminding myself to walk in God's strength, not in my own strength, and that's become a very important part of my working life and my ministry life as well over the decades since.
Was it always the case that you're destined to be an architect?
Well, I think actually looking back, I would say I probably was destined to be an architect. I think that's a good word, destined. But actually at the time, back in my sort of late teens, when I was grappling with what to do, it wasn't necessarily a clear-cut decision. It was something I thought I'd enjoy that. I enjoyed designing a little bit. I sort of found myself moving into architecture just because it seemed like a thing that would fit well for me, but it wasn't a strong sense of conviction about it at all. It was a very mediocre, wishy-washy decision for me, and I was not a particularly good architect. I mean, in my first year, I was mediocre. Paul Tilbury, however, as you've already mentioned, he was an exceptionally talented architect. And isn't it fascinating that he was an exceptionally talented, much better architect than me? And here we are many years later, and God's led him off in other paths through that collapsed lung. And he's doing amazing things for the glory of God. And here I am doing architecture as my sort of core day job. And as we'll hear, bringing glory to God. So God kept me there. And it was exciting, really, because my first year was really tough. I was very mediocre. Going into my second year, the stress levels were growing. And the only good news is I knew I was rubbish. And I knew I wanted to be really good at it. And I was very passionate about architecture by that point. I loved the subject. I loved I loved buildings, but I just couldn't do it. And I knew other people were much better at it than me. And we had this project for a primary school, and it was a 10-week project. About 8 weeks in, I'd torn up 3 or 4 schemes by that point. I'd got to the end of myself, and I cycled out about 5 a.m. to a hill outside Cardiff where I was studying. And I cried out to God, and I just said, Lord, please help me. I need help. And I felt filled with the Holy Spirit. And this was another one of those key moments where I just felt the Holy Spirit come on me on this occasion for designing. And I cycled back in with great enthusiasm to my studio. And in about 2 hours, I'd fully designed, modeled, built a physical card model, produced this primary school. I then spent the next week, drew it up, and it got the highest mark that I ever got, the highest mark that anyone ever got on that course.
Wow.
And that was really interesting because I had experienced that God was interested in my work. And that is a very important thing we'll talk more about, I'm sure. But I'd seen God kind of enter in, but the reality is that moment didn't necessarily mean that on the next project it was all a breeze, and I've never had to work hard since. And I basically went into my third year, and I hadn't really learned that I needed to continue to call on God. And I was particularly by that point really struggling with the purpose of why. And why architecture? I was absolutely university is a very exciting time as a Christian, and certainly we were very involved Paul and I, very involved in the CU at the time. And by that point, I was involved in leadership in the CU, and there were some really exciting things happening in the churches in Cardiff. And if you remember, the Toronto Blessing was going on. It was a time of all sorts of dynamic stuff. It's a dynamic time as a student anyway. There were some exciting things going on in the church. I was meeting people from denominations that I had never had any contact with, people like Paul. And it was a really, really exciting faith time. And as a relatively young Christian, the consequence of that was that I wasn't really sure why on earth I was doing architecture. I just couldn't see the purpose in architecture at all. So although I'd seen God enable me, anoint me, gift me to do this thing, I hadn't really grasped that was in his purposes at all. So I went off I decided to take a year out. I'd had enough of architecture by the end of my third year, and I was pretty broken by it. It's a pretty brutal course, architecture, actually. It breaks most people. But I went off to India, and it was a really exciting time. And I had the opportunity to go and work amongst Muslims in South India. I thought I was going to one place. I turned out that was not the people I was meant to be working with. So the guy I met in India sent me somewhere else, and I rocked up in a dusty town in South India. For about 2 or 3 weeks, my parents had no idea where I was. And I ended up working in this very small indigenous Indian mission organization, working amongst Muslims under the radar in South India. And absolutely loved it. Had some amazing times, adventures I used to go and hang out in Muslim training colleges. They have like these sort of schools for sort of discipling and training Muslims to go into the mission field, actually, which was quite interesting. And I just used to kind of go in and say I was, just interested. I'm a tourist. I'm interested. I'm traveling, and I want to find out a bit more. And had some astonishing conversations, really exciting opportunities to witness there, and to learn a lot about Islam as well. And that was very interesting. And I spent quite a lot of time doing frontline kind of mission work, then walking for days with the Indian mission guys who were a lot tougher than I was. And so we used to go and just walk the slums and pray for people, and some really exciting. I remember one time, another Holy Spirit moment, actually. I remember one time coming around the corner of this house, and I just felt for the first time in my life to speak in tongues. And so I started speaking in tongues, and we'd had no conversations with anyone for about 5 or 6 hours of walking. Came round the corner, and this Muslim lady invited us into her home, which is quite a rare thing in itself. the whole family were there, and we got the opportunity to talk about Jesus with the whole family, and it was a real eye opener to the way in which there's a spiritual battle, and sometimes we have to tackle these things in spiritual ways, and that was an exciting eye opener to me. But anyway, I spent this wonderful time, really exciting, dynamic spiritual time, very important time in my own life, just working out stuff, lots of time to pray and be on my own and reflect on life. And I sort of assumed that I was going to go off into some kind of missionary work, or I was going to go back to the UK and work for my church or something full-time Christian, if that's such a thing. Every Christian's a full-time Christian, I'd like to think. But we do have a bit of a weakness, I think, as Christians for seeing some works as slightly holier than others, should we say. And I certainly in my 20s really struggled with the idea that someone who was passionate for Jesus should be doing anything other than just frontline mission work or working in my church. But I had this amazing encounter. To this day, I can't quite put my finger on what exactly the encounter was, but I was traveling around India in the last month before I came home, and I had the opportunity to travel right around the country. And I ended up in Calcutta, and I just decided one night to walk down to the cathedral, which is in this huge park in the middle of the city. It's pitch dark, there are no lights. It's a long walk down to the cathedral in the dark, and I just decided to keep going. And I got to the cathedral, no lights on, totally dark. And as I arrived at the front door of the cathedral, the door opens and these two gentlemen step out and offer me tea. And they start talking, and then they ask me the most personal questions about my life. In fact, I still find it emotional even just remembering. I haven't talked about it for a long time. They asked me basically deep questions about my life, and they, in no uncertain terms, told me and challenged me to go back to the UK, finish my architectural education, and become an architect. And so I did. and so I felt God had really challenged my heart, and there was a bit more to it than that. I came back to the UK. I went and ran a windsurfing centre for a little while in Greece, and spent my summer doing as students should do and having a good time over my summer. But I felt again there reaffirmed, you need to go back to architecture and see it through. And so I did. And that, I guess, was when I really took hold of architecture, and where I sort of allowed God to take hold of me for that purpose.
So I'm trying to think chronology-wise. What led you to start your own business?
So I finished my studies, and architecture studies are long. It's 7 years minimum. So I had a year out in Bournemouth. I then went back to Cardiff and do my part two. And that I was a man transformed in my part two, in that I now knew God was in it. And I remember I mean, in one sense, I breezed a distinction in my part two. I only worked 9 to 5. I didn't work weekends. I had my assignment finished about 2 months early, and I got a distinction, basically, so the highest mark you can get. And that was really very satisfying, but it was a real sense of, wow, I think God's now, I've got this. God's in this. I understand his role in this. I understand what it means to bring my work to him.
Can I just go back to that totally average student who then goes for a walk, has an encounter? It's almost like, I'm trying to remember the names from the Bible. Is it Bezalel and Aholiab?
That's the one well remembered.
Is it like a special anointing that just came on you? From then on, you just breezed it?
So, yeah, I mean, put simply, I would say yes. I literally was a man transformed, and I wasn't just transformed in university. During my year out, I had the opportunity to go and work in a firm in Bournemouth. Nothing flash, it wasn't a particularly flash firm. But I look back now and I think, goodness, I won 2 competitions to design secondary schools. I designed 2 secondary schools, a temporary terminal building for Farnborough Airport, and it wasn't stressful. And I now, as an employer, I know that's not a normal year out.
Yeah.
That's not what most people get to do in their first year of employment, having never been employed as an architect up to that point. So I look back now and think, yeah, okay, that I was in the groove and I was motoring. Yes, and I think, I don't know what other people's experiences are, but I do know it's so worth getting alignment between what we do and who God's made us to be. And that is definitely one of my passions. And I guess because I've experienced that, I say that's not to say that life is easy and that architecture is easy, and what I'll come on to is some of the challenges with running my business. But I stayed on after my university concluded. I then lectured and taught students for a year, and did a postgraduate MPhil. And then I needed to kind of go and get a proper job and settle into the career. And I remember at the time praying about it, and I had 3 job offers, one in London, one in Exeter, and one in Winchester. And I was sort of praying, Lord, can you show me which is the right one? And I felt as clear as day God say to me, Paul, it's your choice. Wherever you go, I'm going to bless you in it. So just, you need to decide what you want to do. Take some ownership. Take some ownership of this decision, because actually it doesn't make a huge odds. There's not like this perfect place that you've got to be. I'll work around it. I just said to God, saying, get to know what you want to do. Who are you? Find the one that fits for you, but also a sense of it's not going to make a lot of difference to the outcome, which is interesting. I don't know for certain, but I had a sense of freedom that actually the responsibility was mine, and God was saying, come on, Paul, grow up, make a decision, take some responsibility. So I went off to Winchester and I worked for Hampshire County Architects, which is a slightly quirky architecture firm because they're a local authority architecture practice rather than being a private practice, which is very rare these days. And that was good. But during that time, I had what is probably one of the more significant moments in my life, where I was, this is back in 2002, I guess. So house prices are rising rapidly. Winchester's an expensive place to live. And on an architect's salary, you're never going to live in Winchester. And I was really wanting to get on the housing ladder. I'd always had a real interest in property development. And one night I was praying, and just praying about this whole issue of getting on the housing ladder. And this word Shechem popped into my head. And I had no idea what Shechem was, but I thought, that's odd. It's probably something in the Bible. So let's get my concordance out. It's pre-Google. So the concordance came out, and I sort of waded through until I found some references in the Bible to Shechem. And I discovered that Shechem was the place where Abraham bought a piece of land. And it was like a piece of land in the promised land, if you like. It's also the place where, kind of a whole load of things happened. Not all of them very good, but nonetheless, that bit about Abraham buying a piece of land just really struck me. And I was like, wow, the faith has just risen in me to find a piece of land, and I'm going to build a house. So I spent then 9 months holding on to that, knocking on hundreds of people's doors, trying to buy the end of their gardens. Wow. And searching Winchester and going around searching. And eventually I found this wonderful lady called Barbara, and I asked to buy the end of her garden, which was a tiny 10 metre by 10 metre piece of land. And I managed to get 2 houses on it and 2 parking spaces, and got planning permission. And that was there was loads in that story. I mean, some really exciting discoveries of faith, what it meant to be in business, what it meant to have integrity in business. It was a real kind of first fruits of what became my firm Snug. It was the sort of launch that eventually launched Snug, but it was also a real kind of first fruits of what it means to do business as a Christian, what it means to be listening to God in business. And my business partner, Ben, he connected with me through that project. He was the contractor, and he became a Christian, recommitted to God actually through that time we spent together on that project.
Wonderful.
So there was sort of lots of fruit, both at a personal level and a kind of faith adventure. I mean, the finances was just brilliant. I committed to buy the land. I signed the contract. I would have to pay Barbara 80 grand within 28 days of getting planning permission. I got planning permission and I didn't have any money. so I had £5,000 of my own, a bit of money. I got another £5,000 off my gran, and then I still had a lot of money to find. And with a few days to go, I remember going and a friend of mine, who I'd known for quite a long time, I was just sharing with him, and he said, "Oh, how are you getting on, Paul?" And I said, "Well, good, but I'm a little bit stressed. I've got this opportunity to develop this property." I told him the story, and I said, I've got to raise some money. And he just there and then said, "I'll remortgage my house and
Wow.
I'll invest the rest." And so he basically invested the last bit I needed. And the rest is history, as they say. I sort of went on from there and delivered the property development. So that was sort of the beginning of property development and me beginning to express my own architectural voice, I guess, and an interest in architecture, an interest in housing, an interest in property development and sort of more entrepreneurial side of life, and experiencing what it means to have God speak into that and to try and be obedient to that, and try and walk in alignment with that. And so learned huge amounts in that project, and then that led to me setting up Snug, because effectively it was untenable for me to stay as an employee while I was doing this on the side, and the hunger grew in me to go off and do it on our own terms, if you like. And so me and Ben then went on over the next few years to do a property development company called Snug Homes, and set up Snug Architects, which has become our primary business today. So, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. We're about 245 episodes in. You're the first architect. And I'm really excited because we just want every sort of life path on the podcast to sort of show people that God works in all sorts of different ways. And hopefully there are other potential Bezalels and Aholiabs out there that just,
Absolutely.
that will be anointed for their work. And please don't think, listener, that as you were saying before, Paul, that if you're passionate, you've got to be a church leader or a missionary, a cross-cultural. No, God wants his troops in the arts, in media, in politics, in education, in sports, across every field. So, yeah, brilliant to hear all this. So Snug, it's become this massive award-winning venture. It's been really fruitful. You've seen God's hand on it. Well, go on, share. How have you seen God at work in your work?
Yeah, so I think there's a pattern emerging here, which is I kind of get a head start from God, and then I struggle and lose focus and lose ground. Because what actually happened then is that we set up Snug, and that has been a really exciting adventure in many ways, but it's also been a lot of challenges. It is hard work running a business, and it's hard work trying to get that balance right. And so in the early days, I was launching a small business, and I needed to keep a range of income streams coming in. And so I was teaching architecture, and I helped set up a civil engineering and architecture course. We were trying to run this property development company, doing small infill property developments in Winchester, and I was trying to get this architecture practice up and running. And I was also an elder of a church at the time. Oh, and I'd got married, and I'd had first kids. Far too many things going on, just far too many things going on, and a real lack of focus. And one of the kind of key moments I remember was I'd been running this course. This university gig was effectively covering almost all of my personal income requirements, and and it was 2 days a week for only about 30 weeks of the year. So it was a really good income for a relatively small amount of my time, with no professional indemnity insurance liabilities. But I suddenly felt one day that as much as it was a good gig, I needed to give it up. And I remember talking with Ben about it, and just feeling, look, I need to let this go, and we just have to trust God that he'll do something with that. So I let it go. Not entirely in one move. I kept a little bit going for a little while because I did love doing it. But I let it go and made the decision to let it go. And what was amazing was in the year after I let it go, Snug's turnover went up by 10 times the income I let go of. And it was a real eye-opener for me, again, of what we focus on and where we commit. God can really step in and surprise us. And that phrase, do more than we can ask or imagine, has very often characterized our experience at Snug. We often find we talk of something, we dream of something, we are preoccupied by the firefighting and we can't see the wood for the trees. And then we look back a year later and we think, oh, we've arrived. How weird. We've arrived where we were hoping to be, but the journey has felt like firefighting and treacle and mud. And so one of the things we're still grappling with, even today, is how to walk in that place of peace and rest, despite the fact that it always seems to feel like one's firefighting and walking through treacle. And I think probably business, just by its very nature, is hard graft, and there's always challenges. And as a director of a business, you're always hearing about the things that are going wrong. Mm-hmm. Even if 80% of my team are busy working, I hear about the 20% who haven't got any work. And so you're always feeling like you haven't got enough work, you haven't got enough income, you're not working on the right projects, you haven't got enough for everyone. And that is both an exciting thing when you walk in faith in it, and quite a stressful thing if you don't. And I think I've grown over the years to go, you know what? I don't want to live a boring life. I want to be on the edge. I want to be stretched. I've asked that many times, and it keeps me in a place of faith, and it keeps me having to keep seeking God and going round again. And that never stops. So Snug is hard work, hard graft. It's not easily won. And so we've had some amazing sort of excitements and achievements. And I look back and go, wow, we have achieved a really significant amount. But the journey at times has been hard graft. And to be frank, remains so most days. And that's just the reality, I think, of business.
Well, listen, let's talk about what has catapulted you in the sort of on TV and that sort of stuff of late, which is being the architect for the UK's largest Christian landmark. So we've had Richard Gamble on a few years ago, and I'll put his podcast in the blurb because it was so beautiful hearing him as the visionary, I think probably 18 years into this 20-year vision. And now the funding's come in, and now ground has been broken on the eternal wall of answered prayer. Go on, just for people that haven't got a clue about it, tell the story.
Yeah, great. It is a very exciting story. And the big news is that we broke ground on the project a couple of weeks ago. So what that means is it started on site. And what that means is it's happening. It's under contract. It's going to have a completion date in 2028. So that's the end, if you like, where we are now. It's a really exciting moment in the project. So how did I become architect of the largest Christian landmark in the UK? Well, that is quite a long story. It's been a long journey. Richard's been on the journey much longer than me, but I've been on the journey 9 years now, and we're only just starting on site. So it's definitely our slowest project, but it is definitely one of our most exciting, and I hope and pray our most impactful project to date. So there was an international design competition back in 2016. One of my colleagues, one of my non-Christian team here, he came to me, he'd seen it. We don't enter competitions. Competitions are a waste of time. They're a waste of risk. They're a waste of energy, fees, costs. They're very generally not a good way of winning work, in my experience. But this one, we felt something different. This was a very explicitly Christian brief, and I'd never come across anything quite so explicitly Christian to work on. And I just felt we should go for it. And so, contrary to our normal wisdom, we decided to enter the competition, and I decided what we would do because I thought it would generate quite an interesting internal conversation around answered prayer. People are comfortable with the concept of prayer. They are much less comfortable with the concept of answered prayer. I'm sort of wondering sometimes if Christians also are sort of uncomfortable about the concept of answered prayer, because what about all the prayers that haven't been answered and all those kind of complicated questions? But I thought, no, this is great. We're going to grapple with this. So I set a little in-house competition to say, look, if anyone wants to get involved, go away over the weekend and come back with your ideas, and we'll have a little show and tell on Monday morning. So I did the same, and I went back home, and as is my way when I'm confronted with a difficult, challenging, and particularly spiritual problem, I pray about it. And I prayed, and literally instantaneously, what popped into my head was 1 million bricks, which is going to be on the surface of the monument, representing 1 million answered prayers. That's massive. That's 15,100 and something square meters of brickwork. That's completely inaccessible. That is not great. And as a wall, that's 7.5 kilometers long, 2 meters high. that is really not inspiring at all. And I prayed in that moment of, Lord, what do I do with this? And inspiration struck, and I basically I cut out a piece of card, I twisted that into a circle, made a circular courtyard. I thought that's still not very inspiring. Continued to pray, and inspiration struck again, and I twisted it into this Mobius strip, and I knew instantly I had something very special, because the brief was, it had to be iconic, and you can't design something to be iconic, because it just happens whether things are iconic or not. You don't really get to choose. But I sensed this was something that was beautifully simple, and has proved to be beautifully poetic as well, and contain a great deal of meaning. But anyway, I came back into the office. I let everyone else go first, because if a director goes first, the outcome is normally certain, or might be seen to be distorted. So I let everyone else go, and then I shared what God had given to me. And the team felt unanimously two things, actually. One, that it was the best of the options, and two, that it somehow captured many of the things the rest of the team had presented, but in a much more elegant, simple way. And so I often joke that my contribution to Eternal Wall is only a couple of minutes. And in some ways, yes, that is. It is that couple of minutes in prayer that ultimately delivered the what would become the competition-winning entry. But that journey was not without its stresses and anxieties, because they had 124, I think it is, entries from 33 countries. They then whittled it down to 20, and they would release one each day on social media. And every day it wasn't our scheme. And then we'd have to wait another day. And I think it went to something like day 21 before ours was eventually one of the shortlisted 20. So we thought, brilliant, we've made it to the first 20. Then they had a shortlisting down to 5, which was like a sort of public vote type thing from memory in January 2017, I think this was. And that was stressful, because we didn't have a big social media machine to kind of unleash. So we were like, oh, and in the end, we were just like, Lord, if this is your plan and purpose, then, we just submit that to you. We're not going to be able to go out there and try and manipulate this. And again, wonderfully, we were down to the last 5. But there's nothing worse than getting into the last 5 in an architectural competition if you don't then win it, because you're now going to have to spend a lot of time and money refining your idea to quite a significant level of detail in order to then present it in the last 5. And so we then went on hold for quite a long time, and we had they were looking for land, and I'm sure Richard will tell a story about the land, but very exciting how God gave the land. But that was quite a long gap for us while we just had to pause. And then there was an abortive site, and that site did not fit our scheme at all. It would have been a total disaster for our scheme. We would not have won. And amazingly, that bit of land fell through, and God gave a different piece of land, which was perfectly suited to our idea, which was great. And we then had to design our scheme on that piece of land, properly develop it up to a kind of detailed concept design stage, and present. And one wonderful moment for me was I'd had a CGI created, and we'd gone to this really top CGI company. And like any artist, they were quite opinionated about their art. And I'd said to them, look, what I want is our monument with the sky being that moment when there's a rainbow somewhere in the sky. But I don't want the rainbow in the image. I want the dark clouds and the light and that bright sunshine on one side of the image, and dark clouds on the other, and the light shining onto the monument, etc. But that moment when there's a rainbow somewhere in the sky. And he didn't want to do it, but eventually he agreed and said, okay, I'll do that. And they created this image. And we submitted to the competition. I went home, I sat down to have my supper, I looked out the window, and I'm not joking, there was the exact sky, but with a double rainbow. And it was like not only one massive rainbow, full arc, right across in front of our house, but a double one over the top of it. And I just had this great big sense of peace that we had done our best, and we really had thrown everything at it, because I nearly quit 2 weeks before. It was just breaking us. And I was like, no, we're going to double down. We're going to go in full. Wonderfully, a few weeks later, Richard Gamble, good man that he is, came down to where I live in Lymington, drove all the way down from the Midlands, met me in a pub. I was with my mates at the time. He comes in And he says, I've got some good news for you, Paul. So that was
Yay!
it. It was like, yes. And it was
Brilliant.
one of those great kind of yes moments. When I got planning permission for Shechem, it was one of those, yes, Lord. And they are relatively few and far between in life. But oh my goodness, they're important moments in our lives.
Yeah.
If you've not gone, yes, Lord, in like the last decade, pray about it. I'd like to think in the last few weeks, if you haven't, but that's probably asking a bit much of God. But nonetheless, it was one of those moments. And yeah, we then went on to get planning permission and then to support the team on the development of the design and the refinement and all the long process that takes. And here we are now starting on site. So yeah, big moment.
And good old Lord Edmonston, isn't it, who has put in a spectacular amount of money.
Yeah, so there's a number of firsts. I believe he's made one of the biggest donations in Christendom, which in UK anyway, in UK Christendom. And I think that's really interesting because he's a great guy. And when he's got up and spoke at the groundbreaking ceremony, it was so lovely to hear his reasons for doing that, because he wants to put Jesus at the center of our nation. And he wants to be part of that. And God's blessed him with the means to make that possible. And to whom much is given, much is required. And that's his big investment. That's his big challenge, is to release some of his blessing and enable that to happen. So thousands of other people have given, really generously to that project. But these kind of big things need some people who can be bigger with that generosity, if you like, to get them over the line. It's not a cheap thing to deliver a largest Christian landmark in the UK. And, maybe neither should it be. We're trying to build something that will be there for well over 120 years. That's just the design life, 120 years. And it is massive. If you drop it into Trafalgar Square, it would fill the square and doff Nelson's hat.
Brilliant. And
so it's big.
Yeah. And for people to imagine it, well, it's between motorways, isn't it? So that hundreds of thousands of people will see it daily. And I've sent in a number of Burundi prayers because there's 1 million bricks. So when you scan whichever brick, you're going to get a story of an answered prayer. And so as you're listening right now, you could even be part of it. Thousands of you could send in more bricks to be filled up. Can you just say...
That's one of the unique things about it. And one of the unique things about it is it's a public kind of joint venture piece of art, really. So it's like a crowd-funded but crowd-inhabited piece of public art. And so... all we've done, all I've had the privilege of doing, is creating the canvas, the blank canvas. But without the answered prayers, it is just an empty skeleton. It's a blank canvas. It's like Ezekiel's bones, if you like. It needs the living stories of God's people to bring it to life. And so it is a canvas waiting to receive 1 million testimonies of prayer. And there are, I think, about 125,000, which in and of itself is an astonishing database of Christian stories of prayer. And it's going to give people the opportunity to engage with those stories and effectively curate their own artistic experience. So they'll be able to access that database of prayers and curate their own experience off that consistent canvas of the monument itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And good old Richard, he is so explicit in it's for Jesus, it's for Christ.
Yes.
It's not faith, it's not all religions. He's had temptations of people trying to talk him out, dilute the vision. On every interview I've seen him on TV, radio, it's always getting Jesus at the forefront. So wonderful. Can you just say, for people that haven't seen it, I mean, guys, Google image Eternal Wall of Answered Prayer to see it, but just explain what it looks like.
Yeah. So what is it? It's a white Mobius strip. So if you know what a Mobius strip is, it's a thin ribbon that has effectively got a twist in it, so it becomes a surface without beginning or end. So it's which has obvious sort of interest to that. But it basically then we've then taken that fundamental shape and then given it a much higher twisting arch. So effectively, it kind of forms an open-sided courtyard that wraps round behind you. And then it rises up into the air, forms this arch, which then twists and dives back down to the ground again. And that form is, in a sense, indicative of the life of prayer, because it's grounded and it kind of sweeps round close to the ground where it effectively is inhabiting life. Then whatever the reasons that motivate us to pray, it then orientates us heavenward. It takes us up. And just as you go past the apex of the arch, it twists. Our circumstances are transformed and it brings us back down to earth again, and it's grounded. And then it goes off round again, and life goes on, and you're back again, and it never ends, because it's a surface without beginning or end. So the cycle, if you like, is an endless cycle, as the cycle of prayer should be. It's about looking heavenward, grounding it back in our lives, whatever that answer may be, and then going round and putting it to work, and then doing it all again. And so it just goes in that cycle. Now, there's so many poetic things that have come out which have potential spiritual meaning for people, but I'm very intentionally not putting out there what is the spiritual meaning of this monument, because it's a piece of art and people see different things in it, and I love that. And importantly, not one of these things was in my mind when I originally sketched it. Not one of them. They've just been things we've discovered, and there's been some amazing discoveries we've had which have shown us as architects, in our kind of architect's way of seeing the world, God's hand on the monument. Things that in our little world of architecture are quite miraculous. And that's been quite exciting.
Oh, Paul, it's so good and amazing to think that 2 minutes of God-given inspiration, that's better than 10 years of doing stuff in your own strength, isn't it? And
that is absolutely right, Simon. That is the phrase, really. I think, that if supernatural intervention that can change and transform circumstances, that is in so many ways what an answered prayer is.
Yeah.
It may be a change in our perspective. It may be a change in our priorities. It may be something, but it may be if something happens, the doorbell rings. And as happened when I went to India, I needed I remember it was brilliant. I needed 160 quid £180 to pay for a vaccine that I'd forgotten I needed. And I had no money. And then the doorbell, someone put through the letterbox an envelope. And I don't to this day know who it was. And what was brilliant is there was £200 in it, which was the £200 minus the tithe gave me the 180 quid. And I just thought, wow, God is so precise.
Oh,
Precise.
Love those stories.
He knows what our needs are. So, he can provide. We have to just keep reminding ourselves of that sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey folks, I love being part of this massive international community of faith gathered around this podcast. And I think most of you know that it comes out under the auspices of Great Lakes Outreach, and we work in Burundi, which is currently tragically still the hungriest country in the world. And yet amidst the grim narrative, there's so much beautiful stuff going on. And we reckon that our 30 ministry partners out there have meaningfully impacted 950,000 people this year, and you can be a part of it. Could you consider giving, £20 or $10 a month, something that's small to us that makes a humongous impact out there as we get prostitutes out of prostitution by teaching them a trade, or microfinance initiatives for widows to be able to start their own business, or orphanages being equipped with what they need, school sponsorship. There's so much beautiful stuff. If you want to consider that, I would love your help. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do so. Go to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. That's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. Thanks so much for your consideration. And now let's get back to the podcast.
Oh, that is so encouraging to hear. Now, listen, we're running out of time. You're the founder of BizMin. You're the author of the BizMin course. So this is business as ministry, and beautiful stuff happening there. So go on, blast us.
Yeah, so a parallel story running through everything I've been sharing is I went to India, as I said, when I was a student, but I went back to India in 2007 to take a group of my students out there to build a leprosy village. The trip was a complete debacle, but on the flight home, I just had this really clear sense of God saying to me, Paul, you need to return to India and call and equip a generation of Christian entrepreneurs to do business as ministry. And I was like, okay. And I got home and I just had an incredible download of teaching material. And I just wrote all this teaching material in about a week. And it was one of those kind of really intense sort of brain dump moments. But anyway, I then had the opportunity to go back to India. And over the next 10 years, I ended up working with about 2,500 pastors across South India, going from village to city to church to slum. No matter where I was given the opportunity, sometimes it was a room full of 30 people from a slum. Other times it was 200 church leaders in huge denominations with hundreds of people in their churches, or thousands of. Some of these pastors had sort of 300 churches they planted. Astonishing kind of opportunities to sort of present the message that God had given me. And it was an incredibly encouraging time. I'd go out there for about a week or two. I'd always take someone with me, and we would just go and just, this wonderful guy, Pastor Daniel, who's been a huge blessing in my life. Incredible guy. He's an Indian church planter. And I knew when I met him, he was such a good guy, because he lived in a shack, and the 30 children he'd adopted lived in a concrete house.
Wow.
And I thought, here's a man of God, this guy I can trust.
Yeah.
Anyway, he and I have been on some amazing adventures. And he really felt God had given this message it was timely, and he really got it. And he and I would drive around all over South India just delivering this message. So that was really exciting, but the message was effectively still very much contained within me, and me being on the ground sharing it. In the meantime, I'd had the chance to go to Lesotho and deliver some of this material there. But I felt in 2017, God saying to me, Paul, you need to put your head above the parapet, and you need to release this beyond you. And so I felt I needed to launch this organization called BizMin. And that was about September the 9th, I think. And I suddenly realized that the 500th anniversary of the Reformation was on the 31st of October in that year, which was 2017. And I thought, what an incredible date to launch an organization that's all about your day job being your ministry, every member ministry. This is good. So I set the web designer the unenviable task of, we've got to launch on the 31st of October. And he did a brilliant job, Tim, and we launched on the 31st of October. And as is often the way with these things, we launched, but that was that. There was nothing. there was no real, there was nothing to do with that launch. There was no people. There was no one knew about the launch, etc. And I emailed a few mates, and a few people went on the website. And about 9 months later, we'd made really no progress at all. And I felt God saying to me, Paul, you've got to put your money where your mouth is. So I invested a very small amount of money, but nonetheless, a trickle of money into a Google AdWords campaign. And we'd set this launch initiative, which we called Project 500, which was to try and find 500 Christian entrepreneurs who would identify and sign up to a pledge to commit to do business as ministry, who would identify as Christian entrepreneurs with this commitment to do business as ministry. And we'd made very little progress at all. And then I launched this AdWord campaign, and in the space of 4 weeks, just as we came up to the year anniversary, we got up to our 500 target.
Brilliant.
And it was astonishing, because I went on the Google AdWords kind of website bit and tried to look at the analytics. And I'm not joking. The world went green, which was the color of BizMin. It was unbelievable. We had people from the Middle East, 1040 window, Myanmar, China, South America, North America. It was not all people from North America, which is what you might expect, or all people from Britain, which you might expect. It was sort of absolutely global. And I thought, wow, there is a hunger for this subject in the world. There is a massive hunger. And so we suddenly had all these people, and I was kind of like, what do I do with these people? So I'm not a very good finisher. So I decided that what might help me finish a book would be if I had to publish a chapter every month and send it to all the people who were signing up on the website. So I did that, and that kind of kept me kind of focused on pulling together some content. But in 2019, we decided to pull together properly the BizMin course, which is effectively like a 10-part discipleship course for Christian entrepreneurs. It's a small group kind of iron sharpens iron course. It's currently happening both online with people who just join as individuals, and it's also happening in the local church. And we've just run a course with 50 people in a church in Portsmouth, family church in Portsmouth.
Great.
So it's both a kind of church-based tool for discipling Christian entrepreneurs, and our most exciting, I guess, achievement with BizMin to date is when I ran the very first course. We planned to launch in March 2020. And everyone knows what happened in March 2020. COVID came, and COVID turned out to be a huge blessing, because we had to go online. And like a lot of people, when we went online, we suddenly had a global audience rather than a local audience. And we'd imagine we'd be running it in our local church and invite a few people and start from there. But instead, we ran it online. We had 15 to 20 people attend that first course. And there was one particular chap called John Zhao who loved it, adopted it, and he has taken it and run with it. And it's now happening across mainland China and across the world. And he has discipled, I think, over 100 facilitators now.
Brilliant.
Who facilitate the course on our behalf. And he has just used it as a tool to build this massive Christian network of Chinese Christian business people. And it's proved to be remarkably fruitful at what I call a primer. It is not going to teach you how to run a business. It is not going to teach you all the detail of management accounts or anything like that. What it does is it helps people connect the dots. It helps people go, I am called to this thing. This thing is part of the purposes of God. And here is a framework by which I can make it my ministry. And I'm inspired to do so. And I've now met 10 to 15 other people in this small group who I could share that journey with and continue to be encouraged by. And it's that simple. We don't provide microfinance. Other people do it better. We don't provide conferences. Other people do it better. There are lots of other ways that Christian entrepreneurs can be discipled in the journey. But what our passion is to get them started on that journey and to start well, get a framework. And God has helped me connect the Bible to business in a way which seemingly not that many people around the world have. And so we've done it in Tanzania, we've done it in Uganda, we've done it in Nigeria, we've done it with people from North America, people from England. We've done it online, we've done it in churches. We're still small though. And I feel that, and I've always felt, that yes, launching the book is really helpful tool, but in the end, it's only helpful if it's in the hands of others, because I don't want to be the one running all the courses. That's not the point. We're looking to resource volunteer facilitators who are business people who have a passion for their faith and a passion for business and want to help other people explore that and find it for themselves. And deepen it for themselves, because it's a discipleship tool, and we all need discipling. And to be frank, we do discipleship on parenting, we do discipleship on marriage, we do discipleship on what it is to be a Christian. I think we need to do specialist discipleship for the various areas of life that we inhabit, and
that's right,
where we work out our Christian faith.
Paul, so good. I'm annoyed that we've run out of time, but basically I love it that this, for some people that have come on it, has been a further launch pad or an inflection point in terms of people engaging with their ministry and work. And I'd love it, guys, if you are excited by what Paul's been talking about with BizMin. We'll put all the details in the blurb, and we just want to see more people blessed in their kingdom, passions and gifts. So you, Bezalels or Holy Abs or potential ones out there, why don't you get in touch with Paul? I'll put his details in the blurb. And I'm also going to put Richard Gamble's story again, because 2 years on, it'd be so encouraging for you to revisit that and see what's happened. Yes. But listen, we are out of time, Paul, but any last words you want to share with us?
Oh, it's a real privilege to have connected, because I know there's all these overlaps with our story. You grew up in Africa and you know Paul and other things. And I think one of the things that's lovely about the Christian community is our paths intertwine. God is kind of weaving this amazing story. And we're part of that story. And I guess my biggest thing is to say, people come on, be a part of that story. You are a part of that story. Yeah. Cry out to God until you work out where and how. It is not an easy path to work that out. I hope my story didn't sound like some short, easy kind of everything falling into place. That's a 30-year hard graft trying to work it out story. But it's so worth it, isn't it? The Christian life is an adventure, and we want to be on that adventure with Jesus and with one another. And so thanks, Simon, for the opportunity to be on your podcast. Bless you in it.
Wonderful. It's been great. Well, African proverb says that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we need each other. We need to be as team. We trumps me. And so whatever that looks like for you, listener, bless you as you seek God's direction on your life. Listen, I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer for the editing, Mike Sandeman for the mixing. Next week, a very different story. Can you give us a great review on Spotify, iTunes, so that more people get to see the algorithm? It's fantastic seeing how this is going far and wide. And I want to thank Paul Bulkeley. God bless you, brother. Keep going strong.
Thanks.
Brilliant. Guys, see you next week. Have a good one. In the meantime, God bless and toodaloo.